Hi, I'm Colonel Craig Duncan, and we'd like you to stay tuned after this episode to learn more about Whiskey University.
Hello again, and welcome back to another edition of Whiskey University Reviews. I'm Chris Yow, Lieutenant Colonel with Whiskey University, and I am joined today by our founder, Craig Duncan. So, Craig, I'll let you tell us a little bit about Whiskey University. I know anybody who's watched any of our other videos have seen us talk about it, but just a little bit about what Whiskey University is.
Sure. In a nutshell, Whiskey University was founded back in 2009, and believe it or not, back then it was just a group of three guys that went to the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky and started buying up brands of the bourbon at the distilleries that they went to. From there, things grew a little bit. Come 2012, come 2016, we started putting together a social club where as many as 26 of us got together at a given time, talked about what we liked about a bourbon, what we learned or shared our mutual experiences, and really talked about the history, because one of the things that makes Whiskey University so different than many of the other places that teach about whiskey or bourbon is we don't tell you how it's made. We don't tell you in general what you're supposed to taste out of it. We tell you about the history of the distillery or about some of the founders that if it weren't for those people, we wouldn't have this particular bourbon or line of bourbons. And Whiskey University now is a full-fledged school that teaches online classes, teaches classes at bars and restaurants throughout Middle Tennessee presently, and in 2021 looking to go national. We also do a lot of private tastings at events, at parties, at
all kinds of different things.
Yeah, all kinds of different things. So to make a long story short, just a bunch of guys that love bourbon getting together and talking about it and learning from each other.
Sure, and if you see behind us, this is a very small portion of the collection that the Bourbon Boys and Whiskey University have put together over.
It's probably about
several years.
20% of it behind us.
Yeah, it's not very. I mean, there's an entire other shelf to our left, so
and below
and it's a lot. Anyway, so speaking of history, let's talk about the bottle we have here before us is the Willett Pot Still Reserve, and it's one of the most unique bottles that you're going to see in bourbon because it actually looks like they're pot still. So how this came to be, we'll start back in 1936 after Prohibition with Thompson Willett. Thompson Willett, he decides to purchase a farm in Bardstown, okay? He builds a distillery on this land where they are today. It's on Rowan's Creek, right across the creek from Heaven Hills Distillery. You can't, you can miss it because you kind of got to make a V turn to go up the driveway if you're coming from Heaven Hill, but whatever. Follow the signs. You can figure it out. So he builds this distillery. He releases brands like Old Bardstown and Johnny Drum.
So this is
from the 36 to the all the way to the 80s.
So Prohibition ended in 33.
Right.
They started the distillery in 36. So
Correct.
Just 3 years after Prohibition ended. And the Willett family is one of the royal families of bourbon, one of three, along with the Browns and the Beams. But the Willett family then kind of made other bourbons, like you were saying, up through the 80s for other people.
Right. So, they distributed Old Bardstown and Johnny Drum themselves.
Okay.
In 1984, Evan Coulsveen marries Thompson's daughter, or I'm sure they'd been married, Marta Willett.
Sure.
Evan buys the company from
his father-in-law.
His father-in-law, basically, which is Thompson. So he buys the company and renames it Kentucky Bourbon Distillers. That's when they start kind of MGPing, for lack of a better term.
That's a great description.
They're just making a bunch of bourbon and selling it off to whomever to put their own label on, and that's what they do. Now, in 2002, Evan and Marta decide that they want to have something unique about their distillery. What they decide is they find the blueprints of a copper pot still that Thompson had drawn up, but
he never had it
made. So they have it made in Italy, I believe. It come from Europe. They had it made in Europe.
I think the still is made from Vendome in Louisville. I think the bottles are Italian glass in the shape of the still from Italy.
So they have this still made that it looks just like this. I mean, it's exactly what it looks like. It's a little bit deeper on the bottom, but that's pretty much it. You're going to see, this is where your mash would go, and then this is, where it would be cooked and gone up into the thing with the plates.
So it's a hybrid still. The bottom is actually a pot still. The top is actually a column still kind of glued on top of the pot still. So it's a hybrid, but once it goes through all the plates, then it comes out as White Dog, which is soon to be bourbon.
So essentially, they do this, and in 2009 they released this, which is the Pot Still Reserve. Okay, so Pot Still Reserve is the first bottle that they put the name Willett on since they became Kentucky Bourbon Distillers. It wasn't until 2012 that they started calling all of their brands, well, not
Willett.
all of them, but putting Willett on bottles again. That this was the first one in 2009.
So even something like Rowan's Creek never said Willett on it anywhere, but in 2012 you took a bottle of Rowan's Creek, and on the back, distilled by the Willett Distillery.
Correct.
So, okay.
It used to just say KBD or Kentucky Bourbon Distillers. So
right.
That's it. This is the most polarizing bourbon I have ever found on earth. I'm telling you, you can ask 10 people and you'll get 2 different answers from it. It's one or the other. It's either it's awful or it's amazing. So, and 5 of each.
I'm in the amazing camp, by the way.
I am too. I'm a fan of this. I think Drew, the master distiller, Drew Coolsveen, who is Evan and Marta's son, he did a great job putting this together and really coming up with something unique. One of the things that's cool about this bottle, when there's a little bit more bourbon in it than there is right now, you can kind of hear some, when you pour it, it kind of gulps, and it's really cool. So that's if you want to buy a bottle just for that, it's worth it. But it is polarizing. So
what we do know about this is in 2002 they made the pot still, the hybrid still. In 2009 they released the first batch. So the first batch was 7 years old. Since then, they don't put an age statement on their bottle, which means we know it's at least 4 years old. But the Willett family, the Coolsveen's family, they take a lot of pride in not putting out this particular bourbon and a few of their small batches, not until it's fully matured and reach a certain peak profile for taste. So, we gonna dig in?
Absolutely. So again, we don't. It is 94 proof, so it's a little bit softer than some of the other bourbons that we've reviewed on here, especially those if you watched Ross Osborne and Chris Hart and their love for the Jim Beam small batch collection, and because I think they did the Knob Creeks and Booker's. So this one's going to be a 94.
So let me ask you this. We're drinking our bourbon with an ice cube in it.
Yeah.
And why is that?
Well, for me, I just prefer to have it chilled a little. And two, for me, it opens it up just a little bit. It gives it, there's a little more flavor after it's chilled and it melts a little bit of that ice to get a little bit of water in there. Luckily, we're in Tennessee where we do have some good water coming off those limestone plates that we were talking about. So, it's
Helps it bloom, but you could drink it neat.
You can drink it however you want.
Yeah, you could even mix it, but for the purposes of a review, you really want to taste what comes out of the bottle here.
Sure. So let's just try it and see what happens. So when I had it on the nose, you kind of get some ethanol, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but there's a lot of, it's almost a floral flavor.
I'm getting a little kind of spicy.
Yeah, it's kind of it's more of a, I guess, like maybe allspice.
Allspice or brown spice, yeah, something like that. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Which is kind of unique for a lower proof, but for something under 100, I don't usually get a lot of spicy. But when you taste it, I get more sweet. So
very smooth bourbon.
Almost nutty.
Yeah, I'm getting a little nutty on the end too. So the power of suggestion. Once you said it,
you're like, oh, yep,
that hit me. Yeah,
that's what it was. So that's, for me, it's one of my favorites. But like I said, it's one of the most polarizing bourbons on the planet. Like I said, ask 10 people, 5 people will hate it, 5 people will love it. There will be no in between. What would you rate it if you were going to put it on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd put it close to an 8, maybe a 7.8. I'd give it
7.8. Yeah, I was going to go with like an 8.1.
Okay.
For me, it's probably not as it's not probably, for me, it's not as good as the other small batches they have, the Rowan's Creek, the Noah's Mill, the Pure Kentucky, but.
Do you remember Whiskey University, when we get together, we also rate these bourbons? Was it an 8 even?
I want to say it was an 8 even. It may have been a 7.9.
Okay.
It was one of the two. But it was around that same, because I remember thinking that we were
and that's our consensus, right?
Yeah, so it's right on the money, and it's a little bit expensive.
What's it run these days?
I still think it's around $45.
$45, yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
So it's on the higher end, but it's a great piece to have on your bar.
It's a good looking bottle.
It's a cool bottle, and I don't ever recommend buying bourbon just for the bottle, but the juice inside is great for me. You should try it and decide which side of the fence you're on.
Right, I agree with you. All of Willett's brands are either small batch or single barrel, except for the old Bardstown and Johnny Drum. And this is a great small batch. And when Willett says they do a small batch, they're literally talking 12 barrels, right?
Yeah, it's very small. So as opposed to a small batch at Jim Beam, which could be 400 barrels. So
here's to the Willett and Coolsveen family. That's a nice
thank you guys.
Bottle of bourbon. Hi, my name is Colonel Craig Duncan. I hope you enjoyed the review, and thank you for sticking around to learn more about Whiskey University. At Whiskey University, we were founded in 2009, and we began offering private classes and degrees in 2016. In 2018, we started public classes and now offer them throughout Middle Tennessee. Each class entails both a lesson and 12 small samples in order for you to learn how history and taste come together. We have 7 basic classes that are offered publicly and almost 50 more that are offered privately. For more information about these classes, go to whiskeyuniv.com, or if you'd like to book a class for a party or an event, please email us. Now, I've been told it's important for you guys to like, share, subscribe, or comment to this video. Thank you.